It was a night I would never forget, though it wasn't because of what most people might think. When I think back to it now, the memory doesn't come to me as a singular moment, but as a tapestry of emotions, sounds and sensations woven together. It wasn't the kind of night you read about in romance novels, nor was it one of those nights filled with drama and heartache. It was something far more profound, a night that would etch itself into my soul, reshaping how I viewed life, family, and the strength I never knew I possessed. My name is Alice. I was born into a modest family in the heart of Canada, in a small, close-knit town surrounded by sprawling fields and dense forests. Our home was a humble wooden house at the edge of the village, where the air always smelled of freshly tilled soil in spring and would smoke in winter. Life there was simple, and though we didn't have much in the way of wealth, we had something far more valuable, each other. My father, a farmer with hands roughened by years of hard work, was a man of few words but endless determination. He would rise before the sun, his figure silhouetted against the morning mist, as he worked tirelessly to tend to our crops. His dedication wasn't just to the land, but to us, his family. No matter how exhausted he was, at the end of the day, he always had a gentle smile for me and my siblings, a reminder that everything he did was for our future. My mother, on the other hand, was the heart of our home and the soul of the village market. She was the kind of woman who could coax a smile out of the grumpiest customer. With her warm laugh and sweet-smelling baskets of fruit, I often watched her with admiration as she carefully arranged apples, pears and peaches into neat displays, her hands moving with practiced ease. Her strength was quieter than my father's, but no less profound. She held our family together with a resilience that I still marvel at to this day. Growing up, I spent my days weaving between my parents' worlds. I'd help my father in the fields, my small hands struggling to keep up with his seasoned ones. And in the afternoons, I joined my mother at the market, learning how to count change and charm customers. Life wasn't easy, but it was ours, and every challenge was met with love and unity. At 22, I married Rufus, a tall, handsome man with a smile that could light up any room. From the moment I met him, it felt like destiny. He wasn't just charming. He had this effortless humor that made everyone around him laugh. Even in the most mundane moments, Rufus had a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world, like every word I said mattered. It wasn't long before I found myself completely swept off my feet, believing I had found the perfect partner, someone who would stand by my side no matter what. Our wedding was a modest but joyous celebration in our little town. Friends and family gathered to watch us exchange vows under a clear, blue sky, their faces beaming with happiness. I remember looking at Rufus as he held my hands and thinking, "This is it. This is what love feels like." At that moment, I was certain I had everything I had ever dreamed of. What made the beginning of our marriage even more special was how warmly his family embraced me. His mother showered me with affection, treating me like the daughter she never had. But it was his father, a retired teacher named Mr. Adisa, who left the deepest impression on me. From the first time I met him, there was something about Mr. Adisa that felt different. He wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, his voice carried a quiet authority. Like each syllable had been carefully measured. He had these piercing eyes that seemed to see straight into your soul, yet they radiated kindness and understanding. His presence alone had a calming effect, like the gentle weight of a warm blanket on a cold night. He was the kind of person who listened more than he spoke, someone who observed the world with the wisdom of years and the patience of someone who had seen it all. I remember sitting with him one afternoon as he shared stories from his teaching days, how he had once taught a classroom full of restless children, with nothing but a chalkboard and his wits. His stories weren't just tales. They were lessons wrapped in anecdotes, wisdom disguised as humor. At first, I saw him as simply my father-in-law, a man who had raised the wonderful husband I had married. But as time went on, my respect for him deepened. There was an unspoken bond that grew between us, a connection that went beyond words. He treated me not just as his son's wife, but as someone important in her own right. Whenever I was around him, I felt safe, valued, and understood in a way that I couldn't quite explain. Little did I know then just how pivotal a role he would play in my life. His wisdom, his strength, and his unwavering support would one day become a beacon of light in a storm I never saw coming. What began as a simple relationship between in-laws would soon transform into something far more profound. A relationship that would challenge me, uplift me, and forever change the way I viewed love and family. It was the night my husband left for a business trip to California. Ever since Rufus had started his logistics company, traveling had become a regular part of his life and, by extension, mine. I was no stranger to the silence that filled our home when he was away, but that particular evening, something about the quiet felt heavier. The air was thick as if it carried secrets, and a low rumble of thunder in the distance warned of an approaching storm. I tried to focus on preparing dinner, letting the rhythmic chopping of vegetables fill the void. The kitchen smelled of garlic and spices, and the soft glow of the overhead light gave the room a cozy feel. Yet beneath it all, there was an uneasiness I couldn't shake. Like the storm outside wasn't the only one brewing. As I stirred the pot on the stove, a sudden knock at the door startled me. My heart skipped a beat, the unexpected sound cutting through the quiet like a sharp blade. For a moment I hesitated. Visitors were rare at this hour, especially with the storm rolling in. Gathering my composure, I walked to the door and opened it. Standing there drenched from the rain was my father-in-law. His clothes clung to him, soaked through, and his usually composed face held a hint of weariness. "Papa," I exclaimed. "Surprised to see him, ah?" "My dear," he said, his voice calm and steady despite his state. "I was on my way home when my car broke down. The rain started and I thought it best to seek shelter here." He spoke with the same quiet authority that had always defined him, as if even the elements couldn't rattle his composure. "Papa, you're always welcome," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. The warm air from the house met the chill that clung to him. As he crossed the threshold, "Let me get you a towel and something warm to drink." His lips curved into a smile, a small understated gesture that carried 1,000 unspoken words. It was the kind of smile that made you feel seen, understood, and reassured all at once. I hurried to fetch a towel, leaving him in the foyer to remove his soaked shoes. When I returned, he had already taken off his coat, which dripped water onto the floor. I handed him the towel and he patted his face and hair dry. Thanking me with a nod, "Come to the living room," I said, leading him to the cozy space where a fire crackled in the hearth. The room, with its warm lighting and soft cushions, offered a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. "Sit down, Papa," I urged. "I'll make you some tea." "No need to fuss, my dear," he said, settling into an armchair. "You've already done more than enough. It's no trouble," I insisted, heading to the kitchen as I prepared the tea. I couldn't help but glance toward the living room where he sat. His gaze fixed on the fire, there was something about his presence that filled the house, banishing the loneliness I had grown so accustomed to. For the first time in a long while, the silence felt comforting rather than oppressive. When I returned with a steaming cup of tea, he accepted it gratefully, wrapping his hands around the mug to soak in its warmth. We sat there for a while, the sound of the rain beating against the windows, serving as a backdrop to our quiet companionship. Though neither of us spoke much, the air between us was thick with an unspoken understanding. It was a night that began with a storm both outside and within me. But as the evening unfolded, it became something else entirely. A moment of unexpected connection, a memory that would linger long after the storm had passed. As the storm outside raged on, its fierce winds howling through the trees and rain pounding against the windows, the power suddenly went out. The entire house was plunged into darkness. save for the occasional flash of lightning that lit up the room in eerie, fleeting bursts. I fumbled my way to the kitchen and retrieved a lantern, its warm glow cutting through the gloom. As I brought it back to the living room, where my father-in-law Saturday, he looked up as I entered, the faint light casting shadows across his tired face. His clothes were still damp, clinging to him uncomfortably, and I could see the fatigue in his posture, despite his usual composed demeanor. The long day had clearly taken its toll on him. "Papa," I said softly, placing the lantern on the table, "you should change into something dry. You catch a cold sitting like this. My husband's clothes are in the bedroom. I'll get them for you." He waved a hand dismissively, his calm voice steady as ever. "There's no need to trouble yourself. My dear, I'll manage." But I wasn't about to let him sit there cold and uncomfortable. "It's no trouble at all, Papa. Please let me help," before he could protest further. I made my way to the bedroom and found a set of Rufus clothes, a soft oversized sweater and a pair of warm flannel pants. When I returned, I handed them to him and gestured toward the bathroom. "Go ahead and change. I'll wait here," I urged after a moment's hesitation. He nodded, taking the clothes with a quiet thank you. As he stepped away to change, I took the opportunity to stir the stew I had made earlier, reheating it on the gas stove. The comforting aroma of spices and vegetables filled the air, blending with the rhythmic sound of rain beating against the roof. When Papa returned, he looked much more at ease. Dressed in the dry clothes, the sweater was slightly big on him, the sleeves reaching down to his wrists, but it added to the sense of coziness. The stormy night seemed to demand better. I asked with a smile, "Much?" He replied, settling back into the armchair. There was a softness in his eyes, a quiet gratitude that didn't need words to be understood. I brought 2 bowls of steaming stew to the living room. Placing one in front of him and keeping the other for myself, we ate in silence, the simple act of sharing a meal, bringing an unexpected sense of comfort. The soft clinking of spoons against bowls and the steady drumming of the rain were the only sounds that filled the room, despite the chaos of the storm outside. There was a tranquility in that moment that I hadn't anticipated. It was as if the storm had forced the world to pause, leaving just the 2 of us. In this quiet bubble of warmth and simplicity, the flickering light, I went inside my room, my heart pounding with nervous anticipation. I stood in front of my wardrobe, carefully selecting an outfit that would highlight my best features. After what felt like forever, I chose a flowing red dress that hugged my curves perfectly, paired with delicate gold earrings and a matching necklace. As I caught my reflection in the mirror, I ran my fingers through my hair, letting it cascade over my shoulders. I dabbed a touch of perfume on my wrists and neck, the floral scent adding an air of elegance to my appearance. Taking a deep breath to steady my nerves, I stepped out of my room, the soft click of my heels echoing in the quiet hallway. His gaze met mine instantly, and I saw his eyes widen ever so slightly as they traveled down my figure. He rose from his seat, a warm, appreciative smile spreading across his face. "You look stunning," he said, his voice gentle yet filled with admiration that made my cheeks flush. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as his words lingered in the air, and I felt a flutter of excitement in my chest. His gaze held mine as if he were seeing me for the first time, and in that moment, I knew I had his undivided attention. He moved closer each step he took, making the air between us feel charged with unspoken tension. His presence was magnetic, pulling me in even though I remained rooted in place. A shiver coursed down my spine as his warmth enveloped me, and I could feel my pulse quicken with every passing second. Leaning in, his breath brushed against my ear, sending a delightful thrill through my entire body. "I'm ready for you," he whispered, his voice low and intoxicating, each word laced with a promise that left me breathless. My heart raced wildly, as if it understood the weight of what was happening before I did. Slowly, his fingers brushed against mine, and the gentle yet deliberate touch sent a spark shooting up my arm. Without a word, he took my hand. His grip firm yet tender and guided me towards the sitting room. The world outside seemed to fade away as I followed him, each step bringing a new wave of anticipation. Once there, the room felt different, intimate and alive with possibilities. It was just the two of us, and in that moment, time seemed to stand still. His gaze locked on mine, and I felt an overwhelming rush of emotions I couldn't name. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, as if every part of me mattered. I felt cherished, as though I was the only person in his world. And most of all, I felt deeply desired, a feeling so profound. It left me both exhilarated and completely undone, as his hands moved with deliberate care, exploring every part of me. It felt as if time itself had paused to honor the moment. Each touch was tender yet brimming with a passion that sent waves of warmth coursing through me. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the sensations that enveloped me, allowing myself to get lost in the magic of his touch. No man had ever made me feel this way before, as though I was the center of the universe, the very axis around which his world revolved. His every touch, every glance, seemed to carry a silent declaration that I was extraordinary, that every inch of me deserved reverence. There was an intensity in the way he moved, deliberate and unhurried, as though he wanted to savor every moment. Every part of me, as if each touch was a sacred ritual. His gaze lingered on me deep and unwavering, as though he were memorizing every detail, etching my essence into his mind. In those moments, I felt utterly seen, as though he had looked past the surface and discovered something within me even I hadn't realized was there. His attention was not fleeting or casual. It was profound, purposeful, and it made me feel alive in a way I never had before. It was as if his presence had awakened something within me, something that had been quietly waiting, hidden and forgotten. A dormant spark now burned brightly, filling me with a vitality that caused through every part of my being. With him, I wasn't just existing. I was living fully and completely, in a way that was exhilarating and deeply transformative. In his arms, I felt special, as though I was no longer just a person, but a treasure cherished and valued beyond measure. He had a way of making the world disappear, leaving only us in this cocoon of intimacy and connection. For the first time, I felt whole, complete in a way I never thought possible. It was so much more than a physical experience. It was a connection that transcended the tangible, reaching into the deepest corners of my heart and soul. Every moment with him felt imbued with meaning, as if the universe itself had conspired to create this perfect harmony between us. It wasn't just the touch of his hands or the warmth of his embrace. It was the unspoken language we shared, a silent conversation filled with tenderness and understanding that needed no words. There was a profound emotional depth in the way he held me, as though he was cradling not just my body, but my very essence in his presence. I felt a spiritual awakening, a sense of belonging so profound it was almost otherworldly. It was as if in those moments we were no longer two separate beings, but one united by a force greater than ourselves. This wasn't just a fleeting encounter. It was a moment that became etched into my soul, leaving an indelible mark that I knew time could never erase. The memory was vivid, alive with every detail. The way his eyes searched mine, the softness of his voice, the way he made me feel cherished beyond measure. It was profound and transformative, a gift I would carry with me for the rest of my life, no matter where the future might lead.